Okay, hear me out. Life is Strange Double Exposure really isn't that bad. In fact, it's actually kinda good. Now, this is probably the only positive review you're going to see about this game. Most reviews, if you look anywhere on the internet, whether that be on YouTube or Reddit or really anywhere else, you are going to see a lot of hate and a lot of negativity for this game, and understandably so. I've tried to make this video several times over and over again. Writing a script, starting from scratch, scrapping it all together, giving my true instinctive thoughts that are just recorded, and now just this. I am trying really everything, and everything I'm saying by every metric always boils down to the fact that actually maybe I don't like this game as much as I am claiming, but that isn't true. I feel like this video is going to make me lose all credibility, but I have to be honest. And so I want to say very early on that despite all its flaws, I still very much enjoyed this game. Do I think it's perfect? No. Does it have problems? Absolutely. But did I still like it? Yeah, but first, let's talk about the controversy. Let's address that. Let's address the elephant in the room. That elephant being the lack of one Chloe Price. Now, it's understandable that so many Life is Strange fans, especially Price fielders, are going to be upset about this. I get it. Chloe is a very integral part to the first game, and I'm not gonna lie, a very integral part to Max's life. Or at least she was in the first game. Now, if you've played the original Life is Strange, you would know the two major choices at the end of the game. And Deck9 claimed that they would respect both of those decisions, no matter which one you chose. And while I don't think they necessarily, quote-unquote, respected it, I don't think they disrespected it either. A lot of fans are claiming that they have straight up desecrated what made the original, that they have completely disrespected Don't Nod's original vision, and that this completely goes against everything that they stand for. I think that takes it a little far, to be quite honest. Now, both of those decisions are technically still canon. It doesn't really matter which one you chose, but that is the source of the issue. It's feeling like your decision doesn't really matter. Now, that's the thing. I feel like this series, and really most decision-based games, your decision doesn't ultimately matter, and it kinda can't. Not to the degree that you kind of hope that it would anyway. Now, when this was announced a few months ago back at the Xbox showcase, this was probably my favorite announcement there, and the thing that I was most excited for, because it just came out of left field, and it just wasn't something I was expecting. Primarily because I didn't think that they could quote-unquote make a direct sequel to the original game, because of the sheer size of those massive implications that it had. And so that's why normally when it comes to making sequels of decision-based games, usually what they do and have done with this very series is they would make indirect sequels that are still in universe but aren't necessarily connected to that first game or that first story. They are separate stories with a whole new cast of characters and a whole bunch of decisions for you to choose from that are unrelated. And that approach is usually the thing that makes the most sense. But you could also go the Mass Effect approach, where that original Mass Effect trilogy, each game, the choices don't really impact. Like the story kind of stays the same for the most part. So if you go from Mass Effect 1 to 2 to 3, the main story and the main sort of plot remains intact. Your decisions only really impact the characters and your companions and your relationships to them. It's all about how you foster those relationships and the outcome of them, and whether or not they survive or die. That is kind of the key thing. And I feel like that is really the biggest thing when it comes to any decision-based game. You can't make separate games that severely impacted, because that would mean that you would have to make multiple games. And that is where the very problem lies with this one. But when you have a decision that has massive implications for the story moving forward, like at the end of Mass Effect 3, it's going to be incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to be able to please fans. Which is something I'm curious to see as to how they'll tackle in the next Mass Effect a few years from now. Because essentially the only way that you could actually craft a sequel of that nature is essentially by canonizing one of the options. It feels like it's disrespecting your choice, which is the purpose of it. Now, despite me saying that this is a direct sequel, it's still technically an indirect sequel. You see, because this game in particular doesn't really have to do with those decisions. It kind of is still its own story. It's still about Max Caulfield, but this is set 10 years after the first game. And so they sort of still went the path of having a sequel that still technically isn't directly related. And the way that they sort of handled those final two choices is that it doesn't really matter. Either Chloe died or Max just simply broke up with her. And that is where most people were upset. Now, as I said, Chloe isn't in this game. She is still in Max's contacts, and you can read through old messages, and you can read about her in Max's journal, but that's it. She's not actually in it. Why? Because even if you chose Bay over Bay, which most people probably did, the two ultimately ended up breaking up anyway. And that feels like a gut punch. I get it. But honestly, maybe it's because I'm not as hardcore of a shipper, but I didn't really feel like that was much of an issue to me. Simply because I feel like people grow apart. It's been 10 years. And yes, while I understand that the two haven't been together for 10 years, and it was kind of technically a little short-lived, but then at the same time, 10 years people change, and even a year people can change, right? People are different, we're complicated, we're complex, we're not always going to be the same, we're not always going to be on the same page. Now, you could have kept the relationship going, like, why break them up? What was the purpose of that? But if you didn't, and they were still together, then, I feel like Chloe has to be a very integral part of the plot in this one as well. And personally, given the kind of character and type of person that Chloe is, I don't see her following Max to Caledon University. Because from what I know, she's much more free-spirited and she wants to explore. She doesn't want to be sort of tied down. Of course, maybe she's loyal to Max and maybe she would do that for Max. But at the same time, I don't know, I just don't see it. And I can see why they approached it that way. Because, again, it would be insanely difficult to make a second game. Making one game is hard enough, and I think people severely underestimate the work that goes into game dev. Now, is there a way and a room to have included her still? Sure. You could have also made it so that she was just long distance and that they kept in touch, sort of, but I feel like you could only do so much with that without it feeling hollow. But all that aside, despite how you feel about this relationship and how they could have handled it, it's not the biggest deal to me, and it's not the end of the world. And a lot of people can also see past that. Even people that don't like this game saw past that, and they were willing to just sort of stomach it and see what the rest of the game had to offer. And it's in those criticisms that I get, and I actually share some of those as well. Now, the main story here is kind of messy. It's a bit of a plot salad. And I say this because it really sets the story up to be a sort of murder mystery, but as you go on and you play episode 3 and 4 and 5, it kind of becomes something else. It sort of diverges, and there's a whole lot of plot threads and new ideas and concepts that they introduce that they don't really ever fully flesh out. There are definitely some interesting ideas and concepts there, but it's just like, it doesn't feel like it really goes anywhere. And so that kind of also impacts the sort of flow of the plot. It's kind of a mess. I feel like it could have worked if the game was longer, but I also feel like Deck 9 kind of forgot that they needed to make this 5 episodes. But hey, I found a lot of the mysteries that they threw in, even if they didn't feel all that great, to be kind of interesting. And I think that's kind of what I'm in this for. Now, I've talked about how, by all metrics, I should not like this game. Because again, I share a lot of these criticisms that a lot of people have with it. But I feel like the way that you'll feel about this game is really on how you sort of approach it and what sort of perspective that you decide to go into it. I feel like if you're a hardcore fan and obsess over little details and you absolutely love this series to death and everything about it, I can almost guarantee that you will not like this game. You might even hate it. I'm like 90% sure that you will. Obviously, I can't speak for everyone. It's best not to make sweeping generalizations, but at the same time, from what I've seen, I'm almost confident that you will not like this. However, if you are more of a casual fan or someone who really still loves the series but maybe not quite as much as some people do, like me, then you might actually still enjoy it. I have played every single one and I've enjoyed every single one. And I come at it just to sort of enjoy what it is. I just want to take it for what it is. I feel like if I were in this for sort of logic, then, I'd probably be playing a whole other series. Because there are some things in the previous games that don't make a whole lot of sense. Obviously, this one probably looks most like Swiss cheese, but I don't really care. Personally, I come to the series for the vibes. As dumb as it sounds, and as much credibility as I'm going to lose, because, I criticize and talk about other games for other things, I'm being honest here. That's what I feel. And so that's why it was so hard for me to actually make this video, because it's like, again, based off of everything else I do on this channel, it just doesn't make sense. But that's also why I'm showing my face, because guess what? It doesn't make sense day, I guess. But yeah, the vibes and sort of the art design, which I know a lot of people don't like, but I personally do. I thought it's pretty good. And the music and the atmosphere and the characters, I connected with them really well. And I know some of the themes and the things that they're trying and the messages they're trying to convey don't always land, but it still somehow hit for me. Most particularly in Max and her growing up, and her learning to sort of move on. She's not really tied to her past. Even though her past is still creeping up on her, she's also starting to learn to sort of move away from it and move on, and try to accept things for the way they are, and not trying to change and reverse and try to make everything perfect, just letting things be the way they are. And I think that was probably the message that really resonated with me. Right? Because Max is no longer trying to use her powers. She hasn't used them for years. She can't use Rewind anymore. And the reason is because she just doesn't want to. She feels like it's caused enough damage. That is kind of what she's been saying. And I know it's like, okay, well, she then gets these other powers to switch between timelines. But as you play through the game, Max starts to realize the danger of that as well, and that she doesn't really want to have to do it. That she kind of just feels forced. Again, some things feel a little contradictory, and that's why I get the criticisms levied against it. But I don't know, I just really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed her interactions with all the characters, especially characters like Moses. There are really sweet moments and genuine moments in this that actually made me tear up a little. And I think that's what really got to me. It doesn't make sense that I'd like this game, and it doesn't really need to, but I personally enjoyed it. And I guess that's all there really is to say about it. Now, would I say that this game is really worth it and worth your time? I think it's still worth your time and worth checking out if you're a Life is Strange fan. If you've played all the others, you'll probably still like it. Is it worth getting right now and buying right now? Is it worth the price of admission? Probably not. I'm gonna be honest. I mean, yeah, I enjoyed it and all, but at the same time, for the 5 episodes, I feel like really any game in this series isn't really well worth it, to be quite honest. And I'd probably say wait for a sale, especially if you feel like this is something that will massively disappoint you, because it did for a lot of people. But if you do decide to buy it and you do want to get it right now, hey, you know what? Fair dues. You do what, it's your money, go ahead. I did it mostly so that I could review it and because I was excited. But did I buy the Ultimate Edition? Absolutely not. I thought that was a very scummy on Square Enix's part. I think a lot of things that Square Enix does is pretty scummy, with them trying to push NFTs and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, for that price, there's just absolutely nothing there that justifies the Ultimate Edition, even with its 2-week early access of the first 2 episodes. I mean, come on, it's 2 episodes. It's not like the full game. You can just wait a couple weeks and then you get access to the full game, which you have to wait for anyway, which I found to be really absurd, to be quite honest. But anyway, but to sum it up, I kind of shouldn't like this game. It doesn't make sense that I do, but I do, because, I don't know, there were some genuine moments of heart. And if I'm being honest with myself, that is what it is, and I don't think this is something that you should just immediately write off. Now, there are some moments that I found to be especially bizarre, like the post-credit scene, and it's a little worrying to see what direction that they're taking this in, and I hope that they don't take this in that direction. If you know, you know. But yeah, again, I just ultimately liked it. But that's enough from me, in my opinion. Let me know what you guys thought. Have you played this, and what did you think? Now that it's been a few weeks and that initial visceral reaction has died down a bit, have you warmed up to it a bit, or are you still disappointed? Let me know in the comments down below, and until next time, I'll see you soon.